want to start with a familiar face and welcome Dr. Janice Remy, who's Director of the Sridath Ramphal Center for International Trade, Law, Policy and Services. And she's no stranger, like I mentioned, she's been here before. We think it's important for us to look at trade in a broad context, but specifically we'd like to talk too about where the rubber meets the road, you know, what it means for us here in the region. And on a day like today, people go about their business, but if something happens like 2020 did, you know, how does that impact us in real terms? So good morning to you and welcome back.
Thank you, Tisha. Great to see you again. Looking lovely again, as usual.
And you, thank you so much. Good to see you. Now, happy Easter, I guess, would be would be the greeting. So
Yes,
the importance of trade.
Yes.
Let's first lay that on the table. A lot of the times we take for granted that we can go into the supermarket and there are a lot of imported products there and we could just take something up and run with it. But we don't consider all the other factors that come into play for us to be able to get these products and access the services that we do.
No, absolutely. I think trade, there's a legacy of the word trade that people usually associate it, not necessarily with a positive image. When you think of trade, often you think of the World Trade Organization, and a lot of the narrative around the World Trade Organization is that it hasn't been kind to smaller economies, that there's this big case involving the United States and Antigua and Barbuda from the early 2000s where the Antigua and Barbuda won this gambling case, but the United States has not to date sort of complied with the obligations to fix its measures or its laws. And so I think there's a lot that we need to unpack. The trade discussion now is very quickly merging into sustainability, because increasingly we're thinking about how not just do we, as you say, go to the shelves and see imported goods and even like benefit from tourism, because that's a major export service of the region, but we also are much more concerned these days about how trade is trickling down, who is involved in the trade, the value chains. Are women getting greater opportunities to be part of that as e-commerce? We think also about sustainable services. So in the Caribbean, agricultural services, are we utilizing methods of farming that don't do an injustice to the environment? How is trade impacting these greenhouse gas emissions? How do we ensure that we are more climate friendly when we think about production methods? And if you just turn on the television, look at this big fiasco we had in the Baltimore port. When a ship is impacted or impacts an infrastructure that way, who is impacted? How do we get the goods across the borders and on maritime shipping services? The Houthi rebels, how is that impacting the price of goods all the way in this part of the world? So I think people are becoming increasingly aware of how integral trade is to everyday living. And I think the climate agenda is making it really front and center, especially in our part of the world where we have to not just think about how we meet our climate goals under the UNFCCC and our climate obligations, but how do we become, and this is the challenge but the opportunity, how do we utilize environmentally friendly ways of integrating our economies into the international global value chains?
Absolutely, and that's quite a mouthful, but it kind of summarizes everything that's going on right now, as you mentioned, from the Red Sea all the way through to what's even happening in the Panama Canal.
Exactly.
In the Suez Canal as well. Seemingly things are happening all at once. So it's difficult not to really have an eye on trade. At the same time, here in the region, we're hearing a lot about south-to-south relationships. We're seeing a lot more relationships being built out of Africa and Latin America.
Absolutely.
We're working toward this 25 by 25 goal to be able to reduce our import bill by 2025. So does all of this kind of push in the direction of making trade far more forefront. I don't want to say
Yes.
more important, because it's still important,
Yeah.
but more upfront in terms
Yeah.
of the attention that needs to be paid to be able to create these relationships.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so nice to talk with someone who clearly is in the know, because I think it's one thing to, as you say, like go to a supermarket and the trade conversation becomes very immediately attached to these things. But I think increasingly we're looking at a broader agenda. And this is something that has become so important in discussions at the CARICOM level. So at the last CARICOM meeting in Guyana, one of the things that was to me most promising are the opportunities for that South-South collaboration. So you mentioned Latin America. The Brazilian president was invited to address CARICOM heads. And as you know, Brazil has become sort of a really important power and broker now, because it is the chair of the G20 meetings that are happening this year. It just inherited that from India. And so I think it's a really tactful move to invite Brazil, because not only is the G20 becoming the place where increasingly we're talking about sustainability and trade, but also it is bordering Guyana. Guyana has emerged as a leader on this agenda in spite of its discovery of oil, which we know is fossil fuels and not great for the environment. It has adopted a strategy of trying also to become sustainable and low carbon emitting. So how do we ensure that in our transition from being so fossil fuel dependent to more low carbon economies? I mean, Barbados has a goal of being completely net zero and renewable by 2030. We need to build these bridges, I think, with the Global South. One, because many of the constraints to accessing finance, to being higher up in the value chain are shared. But I think there's also this natural camaraderie among our leaders. So you would see our Prime Minister, Mia Motley, doing all of these entreaties with African leaders and our other islands as well, and other countries in the region, you know, creating these links with Africa, with Latin America, as a sign of brotherhood and sisterhood that developing countries need to really band together to think creatively about how we progress in the trade space.
Do you think that the Caribbean region is truly embracing trade as a key driver of economic prosperity? Because again, for a long time, I never really felt that way. Now I'm feeling that with all that's happening. And for me, I felt that way particularly because of how difficult it has been to travel across the region.
Oh my God.
For me to be able to get to Jamaica, I had to go to North America or travel south then to go north. And it always has been a little prohibitive, if we dare call it that, to be able to even move across the region.
Yes.
You know, there have been a few challenges in terms of, I know that Barbadians have been labeled throughout the years as xenophobic in terms of labeling things from the region and people from the region.
Right.
So all of a sudden, it was not necessarily welcomed. We're seeing these things change slowly.
Yeah.
Obviously, they still exist, but are we giving trade the place it needs to hold to be able to put it on the pedestal where it needs to be so that we benefit?
Well, you know, you put so much into that question, it's hard for me to even know where to unpack it. I think you started off in our conversation talking about how COVID has sort of brought a lot of these issues to bear on our consciousness. And I think when things touch your personal movement or your personal income, this is when things really become important to discuss at a very like individual level. So you're talking about traveling through the region. I'm from St. Lucia. For me to see my family, visit friends across the region is key. It's prohibitive, and we know that that is in spite of efforts being undertaken at the heads level to decrease the cost of travel. And we are encouraged by so much of what's happening now. We have Carib Connect, which is this idea of connecting the region through this ferry service to bring the agricultural produce from the bread baskets like Guyana, that is actually Suriname, Belize, like really bringing it up and down the archipelago. This is so key. But in addition to agricultural produce, also just moving people. And this is so, to me, important and key to our sense of unity as a Caribbean region. I know, you know, the twin of that, which is to open our doors to each other's people, has become increasingly controversial. This is a decision recently taken to let all persons across CARICOM move.
Free movement.
That's right. And it used to be confined to skilled, what we called skilled or certain named categories. And now the leaders have seen it in their wisdom, in my view, to open up the category so that you can really find people moving based on the skill sets that they have, and countries that need certain of these skill sets being able to absorb them. But there are obvious other questions that have to be answered.
Absolutely. Now, all of this,
yes,
you know, starting this conversation, because this is just a small part of what you can expect for the programs that are offered under the institute that you are charged with overseeing. And you know, I remember hearing about the first cohort of people doing the international trade policy.
Of course, yes.
And of course, we're seeing some of them in our government in action right now as we speak. So, you know, very important for us to be able to continue to build in this area. And I think this particular program is why we are now where we are as well, in part.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have to push that door you've given me. It's like such a gentle push to advertise our program. So we are the Masters in Trade Policy program. We are offered every year. We offer the program every year in September as well as January, but most of the intake happens in September. And you're right. I think our greatest legacy is our alum. Our alum is all over the Caribbean, and they have their own network. And what we offer is not just, I think, the traditional trade courses, so the law course, the economics course, the Caribbean trade policy course, the globalization course, but increasingly we're looking to match the needs of the region, which I just mentioned is really regional integration, sustainability, climate, blue economy, exciting topics, the energy transition, investment. So match that need in the region with what we offer. And so I would invite persons who are interested in learning more either to do the entire MITP course, which spans a year, and the highlight is to go to Geneva with us every year, 2 weeks in Geneva, to do that. That's the long haul, but also to just call in and find out if we offer electives that they may be interested in. This is women in trade. This is, as I said, blue economy. This is climate and trade. This is the sustainable development goals and trade. And so if you want to get in touch with us, www.sridathramfalcenter.com. You can send us an email at the advertised email address, or you can ask for us specifically. Our number is there. Call in, and one of us will be there to assist.
Wonderful. It's always great speaking with you. Again, thanks for making the trek down here.
Yes, yeah. From the hill.
From the hill. I hope you have a good weekend.
You
and,
too.
You know, on your way out, collect your chocolate Easter egg to go.
Excellent.
So thank you so much,
Thanks
Dr. Remy, for sharing with us.
And thanks for having me, and good luck, and enjoy your Easter weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.